Here we are. I'm Brad.
I'm Scott.
This is Curiosity.
And we are on the road.
It's amazing.
We're here with David Gow here at Gow Media. This is awesome. David, it's really cool to meet you and spend a little bit of time with you here on your home turf.
I appreciate you all coming in here.
This is a lot of fun.
You made it easy on me.
We've already been on a road show.
Yeah.
It's official.
Yeah, exactly. That means something. That's a milestone. I like it.
Yeah.
The thing that I like too is that not only is this our first time recording in this studio, but it's David's first time recording in this studio.
Yeah, we've had this studio here at Gow Media for a couple of years now. Brandon's creating exceptional videos out of this facility, but notably, this is the first time I've been included in any of those videos. It took you guys to get me in front of the camera.
Hey, you know what? If that's what it takes, we're here for it.
So awesome. Well, we want to just jump right into the conversation, David, if I could. And we'll take the conversation a couple different ways, but I'm interested sort of, you know, we just met here. I know a bit about your background just through other friends and colleagues and other things, but sort of like there was a day that you woke up some time ago that was like, I'm going to wake up and be somebody. Like David Gow is going to be somebody. And I would just be curious, maybe it wasn't a single day or it was a series of days, but just sort of a bit of that. If you could just tell us a bit about that, that sort of ambition and that desire.
Well, I have had a lot of ambition. I think it was instilled in me by my father, but that ambition was sort of vague. It was to do something significant, primarily in business, and hopefully have some great social impact that could go alongside that. But to be honest, I've never really figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I have had a lot of experiences along the way.
Could you tell, so you're from the Houston area originally?
Yep, from the Houston area. Spent a lot of years at school in New England, boarding school, college, and grad school, but found my way back to Houston and love this city, love being here. And I've always found it a great place to work and lots of opportunity.
So why the intersection of kind of that ambition and Houston in your mind?
Well, Houston, it was easy. I was born, raised here, and my family was here. So it was great to come back and get connected in the community where I was raised. And there were always opportunities, but it's interesting. When I first came back to Houston, it was when I graduated from college in 1985. And the first job I took was with the largest bank in town. So it was a good, big, stable bank, a great place to take a job, First City National Bank. And of course, about 24 months later, the bank had failed. And so people who weren't here in Houston in the late 80s can't appreciate how difficult the economy was. But the top banks, the top real estate companies, everyone was flailing during that time because oil prices had gotten under $10 a barrel.
Mm.
And so sort of as you were kind of taking those steps and these sort of big disruptive kinds of things that are happening, externalities, like you can't control the price of oil,
Right.
And sort of how the market kind of unfolded. Like how did you go from sort of being involved with kind of a failing bank to running a media company?
It's natural. Everybody who was in a failing bank immediately goes to run a media company, right? What's the big surprise? No, it was a long journey in between. In fact, when the bank failed, I basically punted on my career for a moment and went back to graduate school. It was a great chance to get equipped for something new, reset my trajectory. And so when I graduated from grad school, which was up in Boston, I had a chance to come back to Houston and work in the office of McKinsey, the management consulting firm. And one of the great things about that firm is the skill sets they develop, the equipping time that you get there, and you're typically a generalist in those first few years. So it was a really great window to learn a great deal of things in a number of different industries.
Well, we're on the Curiosity podcast. And so one of the questions we like to ask and kind of unpack is just sort of the role of curiosity in kind of your life. What are some of the things that you spend your time thinking about and how that maybe intersects with kind of the things that you're working on today or otherwise, but what are the things that you've kind of either explored and sort of picked up, looked at, set down and sort of moved on from or sort of carried with you kind of through that journey?
Well, my first point of curiosity is, why are you picking me to be on your show? I'm kidding. So no, the curiosity is a great topic, and I don't think about that word very much, and I don't often think, oh, what am I curious about? Although, as you've noted and brought it up, there are all kinds of things I'm curious about, and they include professionally, technologically, even the divine. I mean, it's fun to ponder. I believe there's a God. How much is he controlling, or how much is he leaving us to our own devices to do our own thing? His hand of intervention is a wonderful topic to me, and I've spent many, many cycles of curiosity on that one. Professionally, this whole notion of what's most fulfilling and where should I apply my best energies, what opportunities should I chase, has always been something I've wrestled with. When I say I haven't figured out what I want to be when I grow up, I really believe that. I haven't, and yet I'm now down the road here. And so I got into media, but I stumbled into media. It wasn't that I deliberately said media is where I want to apply all my best energies and efforts. So the whole domain of thinking through where you're going to go, how you're going to apply your best efforts is a really intriguing question to me. And then right now in our work here at Gal Media and some other work I'm doing with a SPAC, we're really wading into what's happening on the technology front. What does the Web 3.0 look like? Where's the Metaverse going to be? I'm curious, is the world going to be a better place? Are people going to be estranged from one another as we go into a Metaverse world? So this topic of curiosity is a fun one to wade into.
So something just to touch on a little bit more deeply that you mentioned, I think is pretty beautiful, is you kind of practice curiosity, but your mind may not think about it in that lens and perspective. Like you may not use that word specifically.
Right.
And that's really one of the motivations for us kind of unleashing this ambition that Scott and I share, is the role that curiosity plays in the fabric of society and humanity seems to be something that is very prevalent from 0 to 5.
Yep.
And after about 5 years of age, it tends to kind of find itself in new and different ways, but can often fade away. One of my favorite metaphors to use is traffic. Most humans will sit in traffic rather than turn on Waze and find a different way around the traffic. It's just because it's the herd mentality.
Right.
Where our, just the evolutionary nature of our being is tribal is safety, separation from tribe is not safety.
Yep.
It's that simple. And I think that's one of the beautiful opportunities that we have, is to explore how we're applying curiosity in a variety of ways. And you touched on a few really cool topics. And I think just kind of taking this story through that journey today would be pretty magical. I mean, first and foremost, you touched on the ideals of what you called the divine, and this ideal of this being of God and like what that means for you. And so maybe we just cannonball into that first. Like, what is the curiosity for you in that sense? And what has that been? What has that journey been? What does that mean for you?
It goes back to, I do believe, it's almost a logic trail. Do you begin by thinking that we're here by random chance, or that we're a created being? And when I look out, I think there's more explanatory power that there is a divine, that there is a God behind creation, and we're not here by random chance. And so when you start with that premise that there is a God out there, then the question is, how focused is he on all of us, and how interventionist is he, and in what way does he care about us and engage with us? And those are questions with almost no end, but they're the most profound questions of all. Because, of course, at the end of the day, the most important questions will be, is there a God, and what does he think about me? And I've waded into those waters, and actually, the deeper I go, I think the more beautiful the outcome.
Love that. That's really gorgeous. Scott and I were having a similar conversation before we came over today about just like the complexities of just the human system. If you take the physiological and anatomical nature of one human being, and if you were to like write that down on paper, all the inner works. We talked about something as simple as like tears.
Yep.
Like the role that tears play. And Scott was sharing how like happy tears have a different type of tear than sad tears.
Yep.
Like chemically different.
That's incredible, right? Or like, I mean, the nature, this one's going to be a little more just, we're getting real on this show. Like the nature of just waste in the body and how it exits the body and how it knows where to go. Like, that's insane when you just think about how complex just the human system is. And I mean, I personally feel very similarly. Like, I just looked at it and I'm like, the more I explore the more I just love the ideals of there being this beautiful being that exists, he, she, whatever it might be. It's pretty incredible to think about. So a little less existential, I think. The other thing that you touched on that I'm just like super intrigued by as I'm sitting here right now, you know, like you said, you were in this banking world. I don't know if it was investment banking or whatever aspect of banking, and then you applied your own curiosity and said grad school is the next path. I mean, in that moment, like you've just graduated from grad school, you're kind of in this pivotal moment of this next chapter. And as we all know, for those of us who have been fortunate enough to have a university education or higher, you feel pretty excited. You feel like you have tools that you're equipped with to go forward. And then you kind of like step off the front porch. And I know for me, it was kind of like, whoa, the world's really big. So like, what was that like next moment where you were like, I got my little backpack here and like, I feel equipped, but man, there's a big world now for me to explore. And like, what were those like moments or sparks? Like Scott said earlier, was it a single moment? Were there a few moments? Like, let's maybe like go back on that journey and then go forward.
Sure. I think in the 20s, of course, well, I might even go back when I was 12, I thought I might want to be the next Roger Staubach, maybe the next president of the United States, or maybe the next Ted Koppel. I really admired Ted Koppel at that point in time. And at 12, see, the universe of things you can become is really, really wide open. And all of those were hypothetically possible, at least. But by the time I got to college, it was clear I was not going to be the next Roger Staubach. Then by the time I was 28, it was clear I wasn't going to be the next Ted Koppel. And I sit here now, 58, I'm not going to be the president of the United States. But so the risk, of course, is that the further you go along, the range of options available to you narrows just a bit. And I worry that at times our sense of curiosity might narrow just a bit as well. Because those things aren't available to you, you don't let your mind go there as much. You don't let your expansive attitudes and perspectives continue to run as well. I had an uncle who we loved. He'd had a very full life. And at about 60, we used to ask him, well, do you want to go here? Do you want to go there? Do you want to do this or do you want to do that? And he nearly always had an answer that basically you could sum up, been there, done that. And we eventually called him Uncle Been There, Done That. And the problem is he'd lost his sense of curiosity, his zest to find out what was around the next corner. So what you guys are wading into here, this curiosity with a capital C and the opportunity to continue to grow and learn and explore, I think is really valuable.
Thank you.
One of the things that comes to mind is sort of this idea of identity, just sort of thinking about kind of the from the divine all the way to sort of how you wake up in the morning and sort of how do you self-identify. And I think there's certainly a difficulty in, as we're talking about the metaverse and these other things like in community and what that means and looks like, the complexity of the human body, but extend that to the collisions that happen amongst human beings and the community that comes through that. And so this idea of identity is something that I think is underappreciated and something that is it's happening, and whether we're addressing it deliberately or it's happening by accident is just a compelling factor, I guess, in my mind. And so I would say to kind of dig in a little bit on kind of these steps on your journey, have you seen, could you put words to sort of how you identify sort of your, who was David in the investment banking world? Who was David in the consulting world? And like, is there an identity that is sort of a similar question? Is it kind of a single one that you've kind of said, like, this is who I am? Or there are moments where you've kind of said, hey, I include now these other descriptors for kind of how I see myself and how I take on kind of the different challenges and opportunities that come my way?
Well, professionally, I've sort of looked at myself as more of a jack of all trades, but master of almost nothing. But the interesting question on identity to me is that how much your career and your job, if you're not careful, becomes your identity. And the caution, of course, is, well, let's talk about the entrepreneur for a minute. And Gal Media, certainly at the outset, has been an entrepreneurial endeavor. And on any entrepreneurial endeavor, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And your sense of self-worth is often dependent upon where you are on that curve. And so my identity, my sense of self-worth can be a roller coaster if I'm not very cautious about that. I have an identity that transcends outcomes, that is bigger than the highs and lows of what's happening in the workplace. But I have to continually remind myself of that.
That's a really beautiful point. Um, I've been on that journey for a few years now. It started on December 17th, 2019, to be exact. And I was in a state of incredible confusion and just kind of had a moment of just meditation and just thinking and just kind of like asking the existential question, like God, like why do I exist? And like what is this moment? And the journey a few years later now is humanity first, full stop. Like that's all that matters. My identity and my humanity is my character, it's my faith, it's my philosophy, it's my family, it's my friends, it's my wife. Like that, those are the only things
Yep.
that matter. Everything else, and not in any particular order, except for probably like God and sky, and then everything else follows. But like, it really is so beautiful because for the first time, I can say pretty confidently that like identity and self. I'm touching on this because it's such a beautiful point that you made. That's all that matters because that's intrinsic. I've always thought of if I were in the abyss of nothingness, like would I be content with self?
Right.
If it was just total darkness and I was just there, and I can finally say like 90%, yes, there's I hope there's always a 10% growth, right? Or more. But I love that you touched on that. And maybe we dig into that a little bit more because it's a huge passion of mine. I give a lot of talks on this, on what is your why, pulling from Simon Sinek's research, the why, how, what. I think it's just so important on why you get out of bed every day needs to be because you're fully alive in your own humanity. And this journey actually started for me when I was about 8 years old. And I read this quote that said, what the world needs is people who have come fully alive. And I was like, that's always been my ambition. That wasn't always the case, but it's always been my ambition. And finally, like, it's getting there. So like for you, the role that curiosity's played in you self-identifying that intrinsic is far more beautiful and valuable than extrinsic, even at the highest highs, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I often say like the highest highs have been like, kind of like bullshit in a sense because none of it's really mattered. It didn't make me any more or less happy.
Right.
Once I had it, I was just kind of like, that was it. Like, okay, that was cool. Like I'm thankful for it. But what made me so happy was like fulfilling my why. Like if I'm inspiring and advancing humanity's big, beautiful priorities, like that's beautiful. But everything else is just kind of like noise.
Well,
so what is that like
those
for you?
highs are short-lived and have very short-term value. I mean, they just go away, right? They won't endure. So something more enduring, those relationships that you've discussed, I think, yes, that you want to cling to those because they get you through those highs and the lows.
I think it's so important for the listeners as well to just sort of take that in because it's kind of an easy thing to say, but it's a really hard place to get to where you truly do accept that, where you're not feeling the pressure and the intensity that it is, this idea of being willing to sort of be comfortable in your own skin. And there's so many different ways to kind of describe it. Are there things that you do in your routine or that help to sort of bring you back and ground you in that identity?
Yes.
Are there places that you go or books that you read or people that you go and talk to sort of help kind of bring you back to sort of center?
Sure. Well, so I'm a Christian and our community of worship is very important to us. The practice of prayer is fundamental. One commentator describes faith and prayer as like breathing. Faith is inhaling and prayer is exhaling. And I think you need to breathe. You need to have both faith and prayer. And to me, those are fundamentals. And actually, I'm not going to tell you that I walk this walk perfectly. I'm going to fully reveal that it's a journey and it's work. But on a good day, the outcome here is that when there are highs and lows, I have a spiritual buoyancy, an ability to recognize that my identity is not dependent upon that high or that low, but that my identity is that I'm a beloved child of God, and that doesn't change whether I'm experiencing a high or a low.
It's beautiful.
It's really beautiful. I think that aspect of like humanity is really also like consistency. Like how do we maintain that consistency over time? Because it is really easy. I think as you touched on, to
Yep.
lose sight of it. It doesn't take much for something to kind of get in the way or stress us out. I'm a big fan of stoicism. And I have this funny line I tell our team all the time: stay stoic and keep rocking, because it's kind of what you have to do in the
Right.
chaos of innovation that I live in and creativity. But like, how are some ways that you find yourself to stay stoic and keep rocking in those journeys? Like, I don't know, like what are like some little like tangible things that you do? Is it like meditation? Is it just like, I don't know, doing check-ins with yourself, challenging the status quo of your own being? Like what are some things you do to kind of help you stay focused on the intrinsic over some of the extrinsic wonders, but also
Mhm.
sometimes noise?
So prayer, actually working out is almost a fundamental for me. If I don't work out, I can almost get anxious. I need to be physically active. And then I take, I remind myself that while I'm also worried about outcomes, that most of my focus really needs to be on processes. The day-to-day work and effort will yield the outcomes. There's almost, if I just take care of my pieces, the things that I can control, I can trust that there will be good outcomes that will be a result.
Like it. This has been really great, kind of digging in, and I want to maybe just kind of zoom out a little bit, and we're kind of in this great space here at Gal Media. I'm interested in sort of the origin story. Like, what was
Mhm.
sort of the idea? Like, where were you to get from kind of McKinsey to like the seeds that became sort of the organization that you run today?
Sure. So after McKinsey, I went to work at Compact Computers, great big success story here in Houston. And then at Compaq, I got acquainted with the two founders of a .com, and this was the early stages of e-commerce. 1998 was a great era for e-commerce. Venture capitalists were throwing money at businesses. I joined a .com as the CFO, raised a great deal of private equity, and then we went public in the fall of '99. The .com, the B2C e-tailer, was Ashford.com. We sold watches, jewelry, leather products, writing instruments, all kinds of luxury fashion accessories. Had the crazy stock run up that was all part of the .com excitement, and then the crazy .com .bomb rundown. Our share price collapsed, but it was a great experience for me, experientially very rich, because I got to join something in the early stages and experience rapid growth, experience step 2 of going public, and then experience step 3 of trying to turn it around in the middle of a tough marketplace. Once we sold that business, I really wasn't sure what I would do next, but I stumbled into a couple guys who were in media. John Granata was one of them. And John had observed there was a station available for sale. It was a radio station asset. And it was exciting that one was for sale, because stations are almost never for sale. They're owned by consolidators. And this was a unique signal opportunity. And John knew radio, but needed help with a business plan and raising capital. I could raise capital and help with the business plan, but I didn't know radio. So we sort of joined forces, got into the first station, launched the sports talk station here in Houston. And that's how I got started. And little did I know that that would go from that one station to all of the platforms we have today. But that's the origin of Gal Media.
Wow. How many platforms do y'all have today?
So what's happened over the last few years is that we've really made a deliberate shift from being purely sports radio to more of a multi-platform media company with a number of content categories. So we shifted from being local radio, and we own a national sports radio network business where we create sports shows that we syndicate across the country. So we went from that sports radio to buying culturemap.com. And of course, CultureMap is a leading online destination for lifestyle content, food, fun, festivals, art, music, society, travel. CultureMap, which is across the state of Texas. We bought CultureMap and then saw this opportunity to launch SportsMap. We had all these great sports authorities in the building, so we could launch sportsmap.com, tapping into their expertise. Then we launched Innovation Map to tell the stories of innovation in the city. And we more recently launched Automotive Map. And so we now have 4 content categories under a common map brand. And one of the things we like to say is that all of our content categories tap into the passions of our audiences. People are passionate about food and festivals and restaurants. They're passionate about their sports teams, innovation, and auto. So that's the world where we live, and it's a fun place to live. We don't live in the negative realm of nasty political dialogue. We tap into the passion of our audiences.
That's really cool. It's interesting too, as you touched on that. I couldn't help but think like how many pivots you made and how you had to stay nimble and agile and keep. It's almost like constant reinvention
Yep.
in a sense, challenging the status quo. Like, how has that happened? Because that's curiosity in its purest sense.
I mean, it is amazing to think back. When we started Gal Media, Twitter did not exist.
Wow, that is
And now it
wild.
feels like it's been around forever. I mean, Gal Media is about 12, 13 years old. So yes, so the advent of social media has been a huge change on our business.
Mm.
And getting into digital and getting in front of digital ad spending was an important part of the growth of the company. But notably, when you think about all these things together, we think we have an ecosystem. We think if you come in one door of Gal Media, you're going to learn about the other opportunities within Gal Media. If you hear us on radio, we're going to tell you about Sports Map and Culture Map. If you come in the door of Culture Map, you can click on sports and you'll land in Sports Map. So there's a great way to recycle audiences and make the whole better than the sum of the parts.
I love that. I'd say I'd be curious, like maybe no pun intended there, but like where are y'all on the verge of right now? What are some of the different areas that you're exploring? I mean, I know you mentioned the metaverse very briefly in dialogue. I'd be super curious about your perspective on what do you believe the role of the metaverse will be in the media realm. And I think even more so, what I'm most excited about the metaverse, I feel like everyone's focused on getting into the metaverse. The real power of the metaverse is combining the physical and the digital universe together.
Yep.
Because inevitably it's one universe that we actually exist within. And so like bringing that together, I think is where that natural sweet spot tipping point is going to actually happen. We'll have fun for a while dreaming about Skynet and all the crazy things that we think the metaverse will be. And then reality will set in and it'll be something way cooler and more awesome, but way more practical and realistic. And so, yeah, like where are y'all on that journey, and like what kind of conversations are happening behind the walls of Gal Media around things like the metaverse and other verges that y'all are thinking about?
So I might say there are two different buckets here. One is Gal Media and the platforms we have, and we're not doing a great deal of work in this metaverse realm right now. We're really optimizing the interplay of our social media with our digital platforms. The other thing we have an opportunity to do at Gal Media is to add additional content categories. I'd love to launch, for instance, Outdoors Map, another content category about which our audiences will be very passionate. And I'd love to take some of our content sites that are only in Houston into the other cities of Texas where Culture Map already is. So we've got lots of growth opportunity in Gal Media.
I love the outdoor map. That's like the mountains are calling and I must go.
That's
like,
right.
I mean, you know, and you got REI right down the street. You can get them to sponsor.
Well, we're looking for the sponsor. I'll put that plug in. Thank you very much. I mean, hiking, biking, fishing, camping, all the great things. And that's a really nice addition to the portfolio. There are other content sites we could launch as well. And really, from a business perspective, digital is very scalable to us. We can launch additional content sites pretty efficiently and then chase a whole nother revenue stream from that category. So we have lots of growth opportunity at Gal Media in the digital realm. In parallel, we have most of our investor group at Gal Media has launched a SPAC, and we've raised a lot of capital, $115 million to invest in emerging business models in what we call sports tech is our category. And in that work, we have looked at companies that are really trying to tap into the passions of sports out in the metaverse. And it's fascinating to see what people are doing, the intersection of esports, NFTs, blockchain, metaverse, all happening in platforms. And sometimes it just makes my head hurt, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yes, in our SPAC realm,
As someone who lives in that space, I still a lot of times am like, wow, this is a lot.
if it hurts your head, then I'm really glad because it hurts mine. So
Yeah.
that makes me feel
I
better.
think the noise is what probably hurts my soul more than my head.
Yep.
I'm ready for us
Yep.
to get to a point where we're like actually activating this in a way that works for humanity.
Yep. No, I think that's going to take some time.
Yeah.
And there are some really exciting things we're seeing in the SPAC realm. And I think some people are going to make a lot of money in that space. And it will be very engaging for lots of people. But I guess the way that it certainly competes with Gal Media is ultimately, of course, people only have so much attention time. And it may well be that there are platforms in the metaverse that compete for the eyeballs and ear share that we're currently getting at Gal Media. So we've got to figure out how to protect our turf and grow into the new realm.
So, like, what are those moments where, I don't know, like you're getting ready in the morning or you're sitting in the office here or you're listening in to a studio session where these like sparks of curiosity kind of happen and something like sports tech comes to mind or outdoor map, like what are those like subtle quiet moments where these ideas and this thinking happens? Like take us to one of those moments.
So getting to this SPAC was a big deal for us. And so for those who don't know,
Congrats, by the way. That's super exciting.
it is exciting, right? And SPAC, of course, an acronym, Special Purpose Acquisition Corp. And for those who don't know, the traditional non-SPAC world, you have an operating business that then goes public, listing on NASDAQ, raising capital and IPO. And in the SPAC world, it's just backward, right? We've gone out, we've created a business that's listed on NASDAQ, and we've raised all the money. Now we've got to go find an operating business. And what we've said is that our operating business that we're going to go find is in this realm of sports tech, which we define as the realm where technology is innovating the sports industry. And it's happening in a whole bunch of different ways, but we've defined 4 categories. And each of those categories are almost mind-boggling to think about the various ways that technology is changing sports. Just to name a few, obviously, when we think about esports, that is a realm where technology is just endemic to changing sports. There's a whole level of competition. There are over 400 universities that now offer scholarships for esports athletes.
It's amazing.
It's an amazing phenomenon, and esports are here to stay. There are stadiums being built out for that, digital platforms where content and community are being housed all around the passion of esports.
So be it for the days when mom and dad said, shouldn't play video games. It's not going to do you any good.
Now you get a scholarship.
Yeah, we should always be mindful of maybe we're limiting our own creativity a little bit and curiosity. Right. We're thinking about it from the wrong, perspective. Friedrich Nietzsche, right? The perspectivism theory. That's cool.
So the esports is one of these eye-opening realms.
So how did you get into that? How did you find out about that? Like what were like those kind of moments where you were like, whoa, this would be an awesome thing for us to pursue?
Well, it wasn't esports in particular. It was more this realm of sports tech. And here's how we got there is that when you think about sports tech, there are some billion-dollar industries that are going to pop up almost overnight. Esports is certainly one.
Yeah.
With legalization, gambling is certainly another. The whole NIL space, the name, image, and likeness space in the collegiate realm is going to be a billion-dollar industry in a short order. So you've got 3 categories right there that are billion-dollar industries that are going to happen almost overnight.
Emerging. Yeah.
I love the health.
Those emerging markets in Houston too.
Yes.
I mean, a little bias for our non-Houston listeners, but everyone knows Houston is my favorite color. So I'm always super passionate about Houston.
Well, we've got some great business models in that realm here in Houston. You're right. And then when you think about the health and wellness category and the way that software and hardware devices have been created to change the way that people train, perform, coach, recover, business models like Peloton, wearables, things that track your performance and your health and your lifestyle. It's just an amazing, expansive space. So we got excited about sports tech when we looked at all those categories. And when we were thinking about what story to tell, what would be our focus for our SPAC, sports tech by far was the most compelling.
That's cool.
It's wild. It's exciting to see sort of where that's going to go. And thinking ahead, sort of looking ahead, we share a common passion here of the city of Houston, as Brad mentioned, and sort of the future of the city. And like you talked about how the city sort of has had to evolve from the ups and downs of the 80s to sort of where we're at today and all of the different kind of verticals. Could you maybe speculate a little bit or share, use the word vision or something, but to sort of like look ahead, like what is the city of Houston, the identity of the city of Houston and in the coming years? Just pick a horizon that's long enough.
Well, yes, if we go back to that perspective in the late 1980s when the city was devastated because oil prices had collapsed, in other seasons, other windows when the market took a big downturn, the city was far more resilient. And that just showed that the city has become much more diversified than it was in the late 80s. There are all kinds of other industries and growth that have happened that have been really enriching for the city. But when we look ahead, I think Houston clearly has an opportunity to be a leader in green tech, to be a leader in the new innovative energy sources that are going to develop. And I'm excited what you guys are doing at Halliburton. I really think that this is a great growth opportunity. Why shouldn't Houston lead the energy transition for the rest of the world?
Boom.
And I know all kinds of people are working on that initiative in this city, and it's very exciting. Of course, we're a leader in healthcare. I think there's an opportunity to position sports tech as a great industry growth opportunity for the city. There are some really nice business models developing in Houston that include esports. There's some gambling businesses that are developing in this space, some really compelling apps in this category. And I really think that this whole realm of sports tech is an exciting one. We have some pretty strong leadership in the city to enable that growth as well. So clearly, Houston is on a great growth trajectory, and the entrepreneurial spirit of the city is the one thing I think might underlie all of these industries. From when my father first moved to Houston in the 1960s, one of the things that struck him coming from New England was how wide open, how welcoming, how open the communities of people were, and how open they were to make bets. They were entrepreneurs at heart.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's something I've spent a lot of cycles thinking through myself over the years. Just like, what's like the spirit of Houston? The way I've articulated it from my own brain is we're all explorers.
Yep.
And Houston just has this like kind of explorers type of mindset.
Yep.
You know, we've put humans on the moon and rovers on Mars. And I think a helicopter recently was flown on Mars. That's that space piece. You know, we cure cancer at MD Anderson. We do amazing things in the energy space, from the role that energy has played in energizing humanity for a very long time, to how we're pivoting to that clean energy future, from energy capital to energy transition capital. But what you're saying is so beautiful, because if we strip all that away, and if we're just explorers, or we're just entrepreneurs, or whatever that is, and the most fundamental nature of the fabric of our community, there's something so beautiful about being the most diverse city in the country, having even these vibrant things like our culinary scene, our art scene, et cetera, and just mashing up like culture and industry and humanity kind of all coming together. I love this, like this idea you're talking about of like these new emerging markets.
Yep.
That from an economic development perspective just stimulates the economy by creating more beauty in the diversity.
Well, I love the way you said that. And going back to when my father moved here, he was coming from New England, where it felt like a much more closed community. He would say, and I think it's still true today, that in Houston, if you really want to get to know somebody or reach out to somebody or connect with somebody on an opportunity, we're a far more accessible community, that there's just the DNA of the people. Maybe when you describe us as explorers and you think about so many people, well, they haven't been 5 generations here like they might have been in New England. There are people who've come from another place, and that represents our diversity. But if you've come from another place and you've had to knock on the door to try to get to meet somebody new to advance your opportunity, then just endemically, I think in the city, I think that's part of our DNA, that we're more open to meeting people and supporting people when they come into town.
David, this has been a really fun and beautiful conversation. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. Wish we could do it for another hour.
I think we could easily go another hour.
Been a lot. It really just has been fantastic. Thank you for hosting us here, and encourage everybody to find Gow Media. If you're not subscribing to all of these great platforms, get out there, check it out. We'll put links in the show notes and make all that easily accessible. And so thanks again for being with us.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for coming over.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us, man. It's been epic.
Onward